First of all, let's talk about SNAP for a second. Why did the Republicans send $40 billion to Argentina? Where is that money, Scott? Why didn't that go to Americans? Why? That's America first.
It's a credit swap.
That's America.
Profit on
that's America first. We're sending money to Argentina rather than taking care of people's SNAP business. I would have loved to have been at Mar-a-Lago while the girls were in the martini glasses when they were trying to figure out what to do with the judge's order. You know, half the room was probably like, should we pay it? Should we not pay it? And then someone was like, oh, I have a great idea. Let the subjects only get half their rations.
I mean, what are you even trying to say here, Moskowitz? That the Trump administration building a massive ballroom and holding roaring 20s parties with scantily clad women dancing around in cocktail glasses while Americans suffer maybe isn't, I don't know, a great look? Ugh, the audacity. And to be clear with what's going on with Argentina, yeah, it is a credit swap that has been widely criticized by both sides of the political aisle as a bailout. But who cares about all that when there's partying to do? You know what I mean? Speaking of party people, by which I mean partisan sycophants, here's Mike Johnson to remind us once again, y'all, that this is not the Republicans' fault. You know, the Republicans, the ones that are in charge of the House and the Senate and the White House and and the Supreme Court, actually, yeah, those are the ones.
Remember, these blue states have resisted it. They've abused the SNAP program, just like they've abused Medicaid and so many other government programs, because by her example there, they allowed illegal aliens to siphon off those resources that were intended for Americans who are truly in need. We're working to change that, but it's a step-by-step process here.
So there's this GIF or GIF, for those of you who are maybe a little bit more cultured, from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and it's of Danny DeVito, and he shakes his head back and forth, and then he says no. And I know this GIF exists because it plays in my head over and over again anytime Mike Johnson pries his jaws open just long enough to let some garbage spew out. You know, because if the problem with SNAP is Democrats, then why is it that 85 out of the top 100 counties that receive SNAP benefits all voted for Trump? Why is it that the USDA explicitly states that SNAP benefits do not go to and have never gone to undocumented non-citizens, excluding, of course, those who might have green cards or refugees, etc.? But even those make up a small minority of the people who receive SNAP benefits because the vast majority are received by, what do you know, U.S. citizens. I mean, these are just kind of the questions, you know, that I like to ask. Lying. The answer is lying. So let's check in on some Trump supporters who are being negatively affected by these SNAP cuts to see if they are buying what Johnson is trying so hard to sell.
Betty, you voted for President Trump. Do you regret that decision based on what we're seeing?
In terms of food insecurity, I do. I believe he's doing a great job with the border. But right now, the border's not affecting me. Right now, it's affecting my daughter, the fact that she needs a SNAP and she won't be getting anything for November. And like I said, she's a type 1 diabetic, and we want to represent all the other diabetics out there or people with chronic health conditions that do need this food. And they may not have a safety net. They may not have relatives to fall back on. We know many people, and those people that don't have relatives to fall back on. And I believe the Trump administration, instead of focusing on presidential ballrooms, should be paying attention to individual Americans' dining rooms.
Yes, Trump is doing an absolutely fantastic job as long as you ignore the GDP and unemployment and inflation and the militarization of the police against its own citizens, Epstein files, as well as people needing, what was it? Oh yeah, food. Besides that, though, bang up job. Now, all of this brings up the question, whose fault really is this? You know, we know whose fault Mike Johnson thinks it is, and there is an argument to be made that Democrats are responsible for the government shutdown. But that brings up a second question, which is why? And for that answer, here is David Hogg to explain why the Democrats might be responsible for the shutdown and why it kind of makes sense. Spoiler alert, you know how sometimes people need food? They also sometimes need medical care. Living organisms are annoying that way.
You're saying we can't mix apples and oranges, and that's exactly what they're doing. The entire reason the government is not open right now is because Democrats refuse to be complicit in having millions of Americans, including 100,000 in Kentucky, your home state, if I'm remembering correctly, Scott, that rely on ACA, that would see their premiums rise several
which you can deal with separately. It doesn't have to be, those two things do not go together.
But the way that they're doing this right now, they're combining both.
Voting to support the budget still doesn't, if you keeping it closed doesn't fix the ACA. The ACA needs to be reformed. Healthcare needs to be reformed. This is a way bigger question.
You guys failed at that last time. The whole thing was repeal and replace. You had a trifecta. You tried this. You failed.
Yeah, but that's
So
not
did
true.
you.
They're still in the
So did
concept
you.
of a plan stage.
No,
They've
in terms
they've
of
been in
repealing
the
and
concept
replacing.
stage.
Oh, right. This mysterious concept of a plan, this abstract notion for a potential future course of action. Heck, let them eat the idea of cake. You know, I'm starting to think that if Republicans could privatize oxygen, they would suffocate their own voters and then blame it on undocumented immigrants. You know, sorry you're suffocating, but it's probably the fault of this politically powerless demographic you've probably never had any face-to-face contact with. We don't understand it either, but you're going to have to believe it because it's what we're saying. So here is Gavin Newsom taking a much-deserved break from his all-caps trolling of Donald Trump to explain just how this administration continues to pick the pockets of American consumers.
The state of mind of Donald Trump, the derangement that he's going to use hunger, starvation, to put families, children, during the holidays, the absurdity of that as he's celebrating as you suggest, no longer it's likely to be $350 million monstrosity of 90,000 square foot ballroom where he's demanding $230 million from the American people for some tithing because of his feeling aggrieved about legal affairs in the past, where he's sitting there at Mar-a-Lago around the roaring 20s as we are paying the highest taxes since the 1930s in terms of these tariff taxes. And we just paid more, as I said, for Halloween candy, and we're paying record prices for toys in a matter of weeks for Christmas.
Tariffs are a regressive form of taxation, and that the less you make, the more they affect your ability to, buy basic necessities. This differs quite a bit from, say, the mid-1940s when we had a top marginal tax rate of 94%. See, nowadays we tax the poor. Back then we used to tax the rich, and we also had a booming economy. If only there was a lesson we could learn from that. Unfortunately, over the decades, rich people gained more and more political influence, and that's no longer the case, to the point that nowadays we just cut out the middleman altogether and we elect incredibly rich people to the highest offices in the land, who then throw these massive parties and build ballrooms that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they bail out foreign countries just because they like the president's haircut. And don't get me wrong, I am no fan of Gavin Newsom, who I believe could do his own scantily clad dance inside the giant silver spoon he was born with. I hope he doesn't do that, unless, of course, it would hurt his chances to become president, in which case I totally hope he does that. But point being, I do actually agree with what he's saying here. And based on these recent election results, it seems that Americans might be actually agreeing with old hair gel. But what really bothers me about this whole situation is just the sheer brazenness of it. Like everyone agrees. It doesn't take a liberal or some, Trump derangement syndrome inflicted SJW to recognize that all of these lavish parties while Americans are suffering just isn't a good look. And Trump has always cared very much about his image. So the fact that they're willing to do this, the fact that they have no problem hurting, let alone upsetting their own voters, suggests, as the human pimple Steve Bannon also suggested, that this administration has no intention of actually giving up power. That leaves one option, guys. It's time for a revolution. I'll see you on the streets or next week in this little rectangle that I have with books that I really should organize, or at least put in alphabetical order, because I don't know if it's bothering you, but it's bothering me. And I find if I focus on that, then it drowns out some of the noise, the cacophony of just screaming that's going on inside my brain at all times. But yeah, I'll see you out on the streets for the revolution, right? Okay, good, because yeah, that's the only option. I checked. I was just get a new webcam. This one's broken. Okay, yeah, and then start a revolution. Perfect. See you then.